I'm welcoming Matjaz and Heide to this book presentation, which was initiated by the East Asia Resource Library. For those of you who may not know, more about it, just a few words. So East Asia Resource Library is basically a new kind of edition of the University of Ljubljana, coordinated by the Faculty of Social Sciences and Faculty of Arts, and discusses various issues related to East Asia. And most importantly, what it does is that it provides fee-free access to some of the major databases, digital databases for students, faculty, experts, and so on to use. So in case of Japan, we have Japan Leap, which has been graciously supported by the Japan Foundation. We have had excellent cooperation with them, which of course makes this book presentation even more important. I would say even vital for our cooperation. I'm really happy on behalf of the EARL. My name is Zlatko Šabič, by the way. I'm a Director General of this institution. That when I saw that Matjaz has written with Heide this book, the reason being that Matjaz, obviously in Slovenia, is a very established author. I would even say, without any exaggeration, foremost expert in the field. He partnered obviously with Heide, who is associate professor at the Faculty of Intercultural Communication at the Senshu University in Tokyo, Japan. As you know, or rather maybe I should have said anyway, even though, as I said, Matjaz is my friend, he is an expert on spatial sociology and does various interesting things: urban sociology, smart cities, revitalization of cities, and so on and so forth. The book that we are discussing, Creativity in Tokyo, Revitalizing a Mature City, is a new edition. It's been published by Palgrave, and I will, since I'm pretty sure that you have written, that you have seen, the abstract, that you have seen the introduction to the book, I would basically start first maybe with just a few thoughts. I would perhaps encourage you to reflect on, a little bit what was the initiative for the book, and just maybe just a couple of thoughts. What is your, what have you taken most from this book now that it has been written, now that it has been published? It's been a long process, obviously. So basically two things, guys. What brought you to work together on this issue, and in the end, what would be, let's say, the most important thing that you would like to say in terms of reflecting on the book at this point. So maybe Heide, maybe you want to start first, just a few words, and then we go to questions.
I mean, I have to remember, that must have been 2014, hot summer, Rio Olympics, and we got together at the embassy in, I think, Brazilian embassy, and then we met for coffee and said, you have to do something about Tokyo, because obviously one of the next Olympic cities, at least at that time, everybody was thinking so. And then it took a while to, get together. I mean, we never got in physical back together, but over many Skype calls, and must have been more than hundreds. We finally found a publisher. The first one basically left it in the shelf without looking at it, and then said they are not the experts for that. So we found a really good editor. So thanks to Joshua, who might also see this recording. We have found Palgrave very supportive for this topic, and then we really had already the manuscript together. So I think that was beginning of last year that it took less. I mean, with COVID-19, of course, we reflect on that in the postscript. It took less than a year to actually get it done, and that was really, really supportive, productive. So thanks to Matjaz for always being available with the time difference of 8 hours. So that was really, really successful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Matjaz, maybe a few thoughts from your part?
Yeah, for my part, well, for me, it was a longer process, because I was thinking about this idea, I was playing with this idea for quite a long time. So I saw it a much more, let's say, gradual process, which was building up and was occurring, of course, while accumulating materials during my visits to Tokyo. So each time I went to Tokyo, I accumulated new data, I accumulated new information that I have on the subject. And through these years, it just accumulated enough that it went into a phase where it became more mature as our book. It became not only that the city is mature, also our materials became more mature. And we started, and it was really a lucky coincidence that we, in fact, that our interest with Heide converged on this subject, so that it was transformed into a collaboration on the book. Mm-hmm. And the process was quite intense, not just because of course, because I was here in Ljubljana and she was in Tokyo, but also because we made quite a lot of changes during the writing process. It was written in a different way in the beginning, and then during the reviews, which we got from our reviewers, it was changed. It was transformed quite a bit, but it's a normal process. And as I said, it got more mature. Also, the writing, the book, and at the end, I think last year we really took the last step. We really put the last effort into it and tried to, in fact, filter all the unnecessary parts and produce the book in this form, in this shape as it is today. So I saw it as a much more painstaking process, because I really, at least from my side, it was quite a lot of effort to put it in such shape and approach the thematic from all these multiple parts, because the book, in fact, tries to integrate so many aspects that at times it becomes even a little bit paradoxical, ambivalent. But this was the thing. This was the goal of the book. It's like a practice in style, in fact, on the issue of creativity, which has to be a practice in style, because creativity is not a stable thing, but it's a dynamic, it's a very fluid thing, which is difficult to catch if you don't have the tools, which are in fact the mere tools are so how to say, have to be versatile, have to be multi-functional, and this is what the book is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you've already entered the content part, I would say. Here's what I propose, guys. Since, as I said, we seem to be a small group, and people who I'm sure can, brainstorm this work from our two colleagues. I've prepared some questions of my own, and maybe I'll start with mine, and then if you have any, or else I can obviously go down my list. You can simply raise your hand, probably how to do it, or just, raise it like this, or via the machine, and we can have a discussion.
Maybe
Sorry?
one more thing, because we both with Heide, we prepare a short introduction.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
Maybe we first make this short presentation so that
go ahead, Matjaz.
That the people have the view, that they have a kind of introspection into what is the book all about, and then we move to the questions.
I'm all yours, Matjaz. Go ahead.
I think that would be, let's say, a proper way to do it. So we'll just use something like 5 to 10 minutes to present the book, so that the listeners get an impression what it's all about, and then start with the questions. I guess this would be the best way. So I will maybe start, and then Heide will continue. And I will start with this book presentation in 5 minutes. Let's do it in 5 minutes. I will try to approach this introduction in a, so to say, post-structuralist manner, by deconstructing the book title. So I will go from word to word in regard to the book title, and then try to incorporate each word into a specific set of concepts in order to know what is the book all about. So why we chose such a title, and why we what does the title reflect. So deconstructing the book title. If I start first with the creativity, because creativity is the mere start of the title, we see in the book creativity as various types of creativities. This is what we wanted to stress. This is what we wanted to focus on. So let's say a multifaceted approach to creativity. It's not one, but why we have the impression that we have to stress this, because in the discursive terms, inside the economic field, and mainly also inside the typical commodification or productivity field or industrial sectors, creativity is mainly focused, or creativity approach is mainly focused on the output. And we didn't want to put the focus just on the output, because we think that the output is just that it comes just at the end. We wanted to put the focus on the mere beginning, so where everything starts. And this is this local milieu that we wanted to emphasize. So we wanted to show the value of social creativity for the development of creative systems. So how does social creativity intersect with all these fields which are so obviously always put on the pedestal? It's always put on the top of the hierarchy, because we only look at the outputs, at the mere products which come out of this creative process. So we try to have a look at the power of the context, which is in fact the local milieu, the socio-cultural context where creativity comes from. And creativity as such is very much dependent upon the quality of life, which is present in a specific socio-cultural context, in a specific environment. Then Tokyo. So creativity in Tokyo. Why Tokyo? Why is Tokyo so special? Why is Tokyo so worth studying in this regard? Well, because we see that it is a city with a great potential for creative capacity. When I say creative capacity, I just don't mean that because each city has a creative capacity, but not each city has the absorptive creative capacity. So the capacity to be resilient in creativity. Because why? Because each creativity comes to an end. Each period of creativity after a certain period comes to an end. And it is how you are prepared for these gaps between creativity peaks, how you respond to these reactions, how much are you resilient in creativity. This is where the real value of your creative ecosystem shows. And this is this absorptive creative capacity that is important. And we think that Tokyo is extremely rich in heterogeneity, is extremely rich in cultural aspects, elements, and it has a lot of heterogeneity in all possible aspects. But also this heterogeneity has an end. It has an end if it's not dealt right on a long-term scale. So we try to bring in the dimension of time, because we think that the dimension of time is not enough studied in terms of creativity studies, because it is a huge difference between if you apply creativity on the short-term scale and if you apply creativity on the long-term scale. And this is what we wanted to do with this book. So this is why Tokyo, because we want to see how Tokyo reacts to these changes in creativity. Then revitalization. So revitalizing a material city. So revitalization, we see it as social and physical revitalization space. And I stress this because in urban planning, and this is my field, maybe more where I see it, because I see that physical revitalization is so much emphasized in comparison to social. Sure, on the declarative level, the spatial sciences, the sciences we deal with urban planning, of course, they emphasize the importance of social revitalization space. But when it comes to implementation, the physical revitalization of space always comes on the top. And there's always the debate about what to preserve, what to change, how to improve the quality of life in today's world, where the soft factors, where the soft elements are usually left out. And this is here is a typical slide of Tsukiji fish marketplace. where this notion of soft spatial factors was clearly left out when it was moved in Tokyo from Ginza to the island of Toyosu. And there were numerous authors like Theodore Bestos, Granovetter, and some other authors which said how bad it is to lose spaces or let's say places, better say places which have a lot of this cultural capital or subcultural capital, just because of the short-term planning and because of short-term economic goals, economic developments. So we put in the book, we constantly play with this question if we should redefine criteria and methods that are used to define a place of high value and places which are important to the city and society in general. And then we come to the mature city. So why mature city? Why we use the term maturity? Because we see maturity as a two sides of the same coin. From one side, maturity can be seen as rigidness, as being stuck in a rut, as lacking energy. And on the other side, maturity can be seen as accumulated experience that waits to participate, to be included, to be integrated, used, and flourished. So at the same time, maturity can be seen as being a conservative force, and at the same time, the maturity can be used as experience, richness, which is just waiting to be used for the city to develop, to flourish. So this is why we use the term maturity to emphasize these two sides of the story, two sides of the city, which are clearly present in the case of Tokyo. And then, if I try to conclude, well, we try to highlight the interplay between physical and soft social factors in placemaking. We try to emphasize this role of soft social factors, which are so many left out in all these strategies of urban planning, in all this documentation which was accumulated and is shown in the book and is used to prepare specific urban creative policies. So it's all about uncovering the overlooked, informal, tacit, locally embedded contextual factors which lie in local neighborhoods and constitute the urban creative climate or innovative urban milieu in contemporary cities. So all these creative industries, which are so often talked about, they grow up on the field of locally embedded contextual factors. And these locally embedded contextual factors represent the seeds of future creative industries, and we forgot that. We don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's like looking at an iceberg where you see only the top, only the products, only the outputs, and you don't see all what contributed to the output of this process. So it's all about establishing new forms, models, indicators for measuring evaluatable multiple types and values of creativity. We don't have these measures. And this is what we wanted to show by also putting this paradoxical, at the moment, ambivalent style of the book, because we don't know how to measure this. We don't have any clues about how to approach it. And it's important to start talking about it, because when it comes to urban planning, the only things which matter are, in fact, in majority of cases, I won't say in all cases, but are let's say the economic factors, what comes at the end, what kind of influence it has in the material sense. And this is maybe something which is too much stress or too much put on the pedestal. And I will stop here and I'll give the floor to Heide to go on with the introduction of our book. Please, Heide.
Yes, I'm happy to. I hope you can see that. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I hope you can see that. I will try to go, of course, you know, having the theoretical framework and looking at the theoretical framework, which Matjaz has described and also is covering, you know, it's kind of framing the going local chapters. And there are in total, I think, 4 going local chapters, which is a way of approaching sites which are less, I think, known to, let's say, the people who maybe know Tokyo well, but even to the people who come for the first time, they might know Shibuya, Shinjuku, or whatever famous places. But unknown places, or let's say we try to cover places which are less known. And here is a map, of course, also included in the book. But the first case study which we have in the chapter Going Local 1 is Hikifune and Kyojima, eastern side of Tokyo. We call that area, or we could call this area Shitamachi, but it's a bit more deeper than that. It's all explained how that spatial social history, you know, or how this place has developed and how the neighbors, of course, are very close to each other. But in a minute, I will also explain how they also are very different in their you know, future approach of how to revitalize or how to you see neighborhood renewal. Then the second one is Bakurokocho Okachimachi, which is quite central. So it's near Nihonbashi, which is the kind of, you know, center of Tokyo, if people who know that. Then we have a bit out of Tokyo on the Chuo line. We have Koenji, quite famous for subculture, but still a very interesting case to unravel how creativity here, and of course also the kind of commodification of creativity here have played out. Then the case of Ichigaya, which is, I think, the meeting spot between that so-called Shitamachi low town and high town, more sophisticated areas, also quite interesting. And then Kiyosumi Shirakawa in a kind of redeveloped, or let's say a former place for lumber and other, you know, lower land areas, which is highly specific because, yeah, let's see, I will cover just the first three. On the others, you might then hopefully have the kind of attempt to look into the chapters and look into the book. But let's start with the first, which is located east of the Sumida River. If you know that, Tokyo Skytree is also indicated there, and Hikifune is a kind of you know, very important you know, station along several train lines. And Kyojima is a very sleepy, less, I mean, it's still just 2 kilometers southeast of it, but a bit more complicated to access, and they have different fates, I would say. Hikifune is actually literally overtowered by Skytree, but also socially and physically. It feels like people have been left out by that development, which has attracted you know, high-ranking developers to build mansions, as we see it in the picture here, overtowering these low-scale neighborhoods, which are vacant, which are often, you know, used by aging and shrinking population, of course, older wooden houses. And even so, creative bottom-up policies existed to create a balance. You know, there has been an attempt by the local community. Urban developers focused on the concentration of very generic high-rises and shopping centers. So if you stop there, you might be quite surprised that this is very, very empty and, you know, very, very lacking that, you know, lively atmosphere which maybe other stations have. And Kyojima, which you might find if you just get lost in the alleyways, is also in rundown area with many old wooden houses. Just, as I said, 2 kilometers south of it. But here artists and other creatives moved into Kyojima and made use of the wooden buildings. And you could say that artists are the kind of gentrifiers, and, you know, they support the community in one way, positive as well as, of course, negative. Some people feel like they don't really fit in. But I think here, this is a creative placemaking, everyday placemaking, bottom up. Future is unclear because, you know, for sure, maybe developers would like to get rid of these very, you know, narrow alleyways and, you know, chaotic situation. But I think the locals and also young people who have moved into the area have more to say. So they hold together, they have a very strong bond, and this is very, very promising. But yeah, as I said, they just exist next to each other. And let's move a bit more central. As I said, Nihonbashi is fairly central. And here we have 3 areas, Bakurokocho, Okachimachi, and Kuramae, quite central in the just north of Tokyo Station. Actually, exactly 2.54 kilometers, as you see, Akioka Artisan and Art Shoda and other institutions exist there, which have a kind of impact on the social and spatial pattern of creative industries there, because they are attracting, they're also producing new generations of artists there. And interestingly is, for example, you know, the institution here, Tokyo Designers Village, and also, you know, 3331 Art Shoda, You have to say that the one on the right side here is a very, very public funded by the title award, and the other one is very private and also has you know, different mindset, you know, asking of course higher rents, for example. But this kind of effects attracted new institutions, including here at the bottom you see that under the train tracks of the Yamanote-sen, Akioka Artisan, which is a kind of you know, new development or newer development, because here small shops opened underneath, including ateliers, and it can be quite expensive if you want to rent and, you know, open your shop there. So you know, commodification as a result, and producing a handbag at Taito Designers Village for maybe a fraction of the price you would pay to make a, you know, a handbag or organize a workshop and visit the workshop in Akioka Artisan, which is of course also more commercial, and art or creativity used very much as a commercial, commodified, you know, situation of space. But you know, you also have other places like this, for example, you know, Bakolo Yokocho, known as Textile and Wholesale Quarter, of course, has this decline. So here you see, you know, a gentrified, you know, clothing or a laundry shop where you can get your coffee. So, you know, micro scale acupuncture, upgrading, commercialization, artists and gentrifiers. It is interesting to see. So it's not all glimmer and glamour, but it is existing. And we have looked at this different institutions and interviewed many of these organizations. I could go on with Koenji to just as the last, which is known as the punk and activist town, mainly, you know, known as a very, very strong subcultural thing. But even that area and this award office has realized that, you know, they could promote more projects, including the Moral Project and the Koenji Museum, to upgraded area and, you know, widen the street and find new laws for to allow more development, which is kind of a fate we have seen in Shimokitazawa or other areas which are known as very, very subcultural places. And I will stop here because the other ones I will not introduce, but I think a book reading or a book launch without reading the book, at least a few lines. Coming from the station, we come across a sushi shop. The owner, Saito-san, is standing behind the counter when we enter. He's in his late 60s and serves no more than 15 customers a night. The sushi shop is one of the last restaurants still running along the rundown Shotengai. Their direct neighbors, a pub, a karaoke bar, and a tempura shop, have closed down. In an attempt to revive the Shotengai, the local shonakai tried to convince owners to sublet their shops to younger people who might be able to open a new business there. Most residents have not reacted to the offer, but the local rice seller, Watanabe-san and his wife, have rented their shops to a young couple offering music classes. Page 117 in Hikifune. This is just one of, you know, the many stories we tell.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much to both of you. As I already invited anybody who has a question he or she would like to ask, you can either raise your hand virtually or just sort of wave, and then I will see you. But maybe, you know, normally I don't wait for, you know, icebreakers, so I just kick off with my own question. And by the way, I'm a layman, so, you know, if I ask something that you would find, you know, completely ridiculous, feel free to say so. That's why I'm using my disclaimer, right? But when I was looking at the book, there are certain things that, you know, are kind of similar across social sciences in many different ways. And one that I thought was intriguing for me was the definition of environment. And as you know, it is used everywhere, right? It's used in social or natural sciences. So when you say, and this is the one that I'm going to quote, so I'm going to read it out. Environment in the most holistic sense possible so what it is, the definition, right? Environment in the most holistic sense possible, considering both subjectively perceived and objective, relatively stable qualities of an individual or group's physical and social surroundings. I see the effort to have a broader definition, but here you talk, in my view, about subjective perception and objective qualities. So for me, the question would be, how do you define objective? So when a given environment space is subjective or objective? And moreover, I was thinking, is it the objective and subjective from a methodological point of view the same in Tokyo, Los Angeles, Berlin, Ljubljana? That kind of, it's kind of, intrigued me if you could, try to sort of reflect on this. And again, the disclaimer, maybe the question is stupid. So
no. It's actually very valuable, and I think it makes perfect sense. So this dichotomy, maybe I start, Heide, or would you like
please,
to start?
please go ahead.
So this dichotomy between subjective, objective, in fact, maybe the best explanation or maybe the best approach how to start with the discussion about this, because it's really a discussion. You cannot simply answer this. There is no simple answer to this. So I see it, this interplay between subjective and objective. Maybe the best way to approach it would be the Lefebvre's production space. Why? Because he actually really well answers to your question when he talks about the social and physical production of space. So there is no only physical production of space. There is always both social and physical production of space. So you have to always calculate both when you deal with space. Anytime that you try to approach a specific situation, a specific context in a space, you have to use both. And this is why I meant what we meant, at least so I see it. Maybe Heide will add some different vision of it. What we meant by subjective and objective. And of course, it's not easy to say when is something objective. Well, maybe the best definition is it's so easy when you and this is a thing here. In fact, I will use a metaphor from the anthropological sphere. When you try to cross the crossroads, you always have to wait for the green light, because if you don't wait for the green light, then something might happen. And this is the objective space and the objective constraints of the space which exist in a specific situation. So there are always some specific rules and sanctions if you don't follow this. So these are the material constraints of the space which force you into a specific situation. But on the other side, of course, this is just one side of the story. The other side of the story are these soft coercions, are these cultural coercions, are these soft constraints, if I say so, structural constraints, which are dependent upon the cultural issues, which are dependent upon the mere cultural system in which are you embedded, in which you take your experience from. And this is, of course, this is the second part of the question I try to answer. And this is, of course, goes with what you asked when you said, is there possible even to compare Tokyo with other spaces, with other places around the world? It's of course difficult to do it because Tokyo is so unique. It's a unique city in these terms. Not only it's unique in cultural sense, it's also unique in terms of how it is functioning, because it's the biggest city on this planet. Are no bigger city on this planet, so it's logical that it has its own features of functioning. And yes, of course, we are both Westerns. We are both gaijins, if I say so. But we still, let's say that at the same time that we are both foreigners inside the Tokyo system, we also see a little bit different maybe the situation. And when I say this, I mean that even Tokyo is not how to say, independent from globalization. And you can see it on every step. And these global influences are all over the world, are happening on the same foot. If you just look at commodification and spaces of consumption and all these things which go with creativity, even the policies of creativity have been not important, but imported into the Japanese economic sphere. So it's about fast policy mobility, which are happening. Creative policies as an instant fix taken from the Western policies. So you have these elements of globalization on each step, and these elements of globalizations changed the local, the unique system of Tokyo, and this is what we think we're very worth studying. So this is what we need to study, because these transformations happen in a different way in each corner of the world. But of course, they are in each corner of the world, they are in a different way amalgamated with the locally embedded practices and locally embedded elements which are present in that space. Mm-hmm. And this would be the answer to why it is worth to do the comparative studies. Even though we didn't do so much of comparative study, this is more like a introspection study, going deep into the Tokyo creative ecosystem analysis, but still with a perspective from the world, still from a global perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is why I asked, right? I mean, to what extent your study could also be applicable, to discuss other cities. Heide, go ahead.
I would like to incorporate Alyosha's, I just say first name, I hope you don't mind, question, which asks this question of how do you have on the one side artists as, heterogeneous, occupants or inhabitants versus they are used and hijacked by developers to produce, hip places. Now, you can say that, of course, Tokyo being so unique, they are so resilient, it wouldn't happen. But unfortunately, they're happening there that you, of course, can say, do you ask for development? Do you want to be hip or, in trend? Because that is something Instagrammable. I'm, just as trendy. And Koenji didn't ask for that. For sure, they didn't ask for that. But developers saw that as a, let's say, as a well-established, community which has artists, so everybody needs money, and unfortunately, it turns more and more into something where people think, oh, that's a trendy spot, so let's live there or let's go there. So quite accessible, open. Whereas Gyojima, which is for some people, at least in Tokyo, it's the kind of old-fashioned, not really that attractive, not well known as a trendy spot, hasn't been, let's say, hijacked. Artists haven't been hijacked. They prefer that precarity. And this is a big thing too, that we have this hidden kind of subculture of artists not really communicating on that mainstream level, which you see in some areas, maybe other cities like Berlin or others. It's very hidden. It is Japanese. It is very unique. And yes, if Hikifune, or Hikifune's developers jump over to the next spot and say, let's develop it, which is kind of difficult, because that is what I think Matjaz said about Tokyo. It is so specific, it is so narrow, and the laws and the urban pattern and who is owning what and what is cultural acceptable is so difficult to navigate, that it would be, it is less accessible, it is less open porous as yet. But if, people fall down and say, we move away, it is not attractive anymore, then yes, that might be another, I don't want to say victim, but developers, of course, make artists believe they are supporting their creative work until their rents go so high that they are the victims of their own, creative process and are kicked out of their art ateliers because they can't pay the rent anymore. But this is a very difficult process of handling. If I would be in that position, do I accept that offer from somebody to support my work? And I think, therefore, Bakulo Yokocho is very, very good in that diversity of macro versus meso and micro. So it has a very good balance of, big players also supporting very small businesses, let's say. And Kiyosuma Shirakaba, for example, also being, let's say, cultural rich in history, and having a contradiction or a kind of juxtaposition between rich history, which is very important to be preserved, and locals, moving in. So there's a, I think having a sophisticated inhabitant who is also supporting the local industry. Oh yeah, there are so many questions you could raise about that. There is no clear answer, of course.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just Alyosha, do you have a follow-up on this, or are you pretty much happy with the reflection on your question?
I'm quite happy with what Heide just said. It is just that I was thinking in slightly more general terms, but
okay.
with full understanding that there is no answer to what I just asked. But this tension is very interesting. It can be applied everywhere. And I think we in social sciences and humanities often make this mistake that we appropriate a type of rhetorics that is in its core neoliberal, just we don't tend to say that. So, I mean, it is a very interesting piece of research because it stretches also our politicality, our positionality in all these disciplines. So that is like the added value, to use again the language of extracting value. The added value of this project is to stretch our own methodology that is in fact very political. So yeah, that aspect was what I was thinking about, but thank you.
Okay, Yaoji, do you want to ask the question yourself, or should I read it out?
I can quickly ask. I think this is something I've been discussing with Heidi a lot in our research as well. But I guess I was interested in the word revitalization, especially because it's in the title, and I've seen it a lot, like doing all the literature reviews, and people are always saying, especially for cities or now in rural areas, and these things need to be revitalized. So I'm just wanting, I guess, from your perspective of how is a place considered revitalized, and are there any specific measures in place? I know it can be really hard. It's like, are there any, I guess, hard factors that is measurable, or is it more about observation and measuring the non-measurable, if that makes sense?
So maybe if I start, and then Heide can add, and I'm sure she will add more than me. When we talk about Tokyo, of course it's so difficult to talk about revitalization. Why? Because it has such enormous mass. And when you talk about global cities, if you look at the literature about global cities, you can always see, or if you look at the World City Network and so on, there are a few cities which are, let's say, at the top of the crossroads of the world, if I say so, because they are so important inside the grid of the global network. And Tokyo is one of them. So a person might say that Tokyo is so big and it has such a large scale that everything which comes at him is not important because it will survive, it will react, it will retransform, it will find new ways of replying to these challenges. And that's true. Because of this, let's say, robustness, of course, gives more flexibility to Tokyo in this regard. But still, we use the word revitalization because we think that this capability to take shocks, to respond to the challenges, that this reaction potential is diminishing. This is why we said revitalization. This is why we use the word revitalization, because we think that it is slowly, this robustness is slowly diminishing. And by saying diminishing, we mean that all places around the world are a little bit becoming the same, are using the same elements because of global, let's say, of the global influences and so on. And Tokyo is no exception in this. I remember also this concept of Galapagos Islands, which is so many times used in terms of Japan and Tokyo. Japan was, for a long time, let's say, it was at the peak of technological development, and so many things were in fact invented in Japan, but were never capable to being transmitted all over the world. If I just remember my first visit to Japan, when I saw that the share of phones used by the population was probably around 90% of Japanese phones being used by the population. If you come now, all the, let's say, the phones which are used by the Japanese population are not Japanese, but are of foreign, let's say, production, if I say so. So this is a typical Galapagos Island metaphor, which can be applied to Tokyo and Japan in general, because there is no more Galapagos in terms of globalization in this regard. So all these influence, what I want to say is that these influences have they impact how Tokyo is doing with specific cultural capital and specific subcultural capital that it has at its disposal. And what we said is that it might be not calibrated well, the use of these resources that are there. And even saying the word resources is wrong, because maybe that this let's say that this richness is not used well, it's not preserved well, and this is why we use the term revitalized. And now the second part of the question about how to measure elements, how to evaluate what is valuable and what is not valuable. This is impossible to answer. It just goes from cultural system to cultural system. I remember when I was studying the case of Tsukiji fish marketplace, where I got various answers. The answers from the population, from various types of populations, were very mixed, in fact. There were populations of Tokyoites and Japanese which didn't see any value in Tsukiji fish market. But for me, as a Western, maybe, which have a different prism of it, Tsukiji fish market was one of the best possible culinary meccas in terms of Japan. And this was not enough when they moved it. And this is what I wanted to show. What is valued with some eyes as valuable and with the others as not valuable. So it's each evaluation or each evaluation of revitalization or which places need to be revitalized is contextually bound. And it's impossible to change this if the value system is not following the let's say this system of evaluation. And this it's simply, maybe the best answer is that you just simply look at the World Value Survey and you see how different nations differently approach specific types of values. And from these values, you can extrapolate evaluation of a specific place in a good or in a bad sense. I hope I wrapped it up, but I think Heide will add maybe a more precise description of it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's, I mean, you know, there are many definitions of what is non-measurable or what is measurable, but I think in regards to revitalization, just one thing. I think important is, of course, to see that the centralization of Tokyo in the last, I think, 100 years, especially in the last 50 years. And now, I think especially in 2020, a trend, I think, to actually question whether that is the real best place to be, whether that is the real best place to invest, including Tokyo Olympics, which haven't happened. And for some people, this is also a good thing. I mean, there was a huge movement, or there is a huge unheard movement of no Olympics, and nobody really, I mean, that is not really presented in the media. So maybe it is a better option to live in the countryside. So revitalization of what? The city, which has, I mean, yes, it's diminishing, but it has huge potential. It had a political focus, a center, nobody really wants to move. But I think especially now we see a lot of incentives coming from local governments. I mean, I might say that, you know, Nancy is stressing that, you know, that rural-urban connection, what is there revitalizing and how DIY, self-governance, place-making, bottom-up, not waiting for the government, but also the government, or let's say, of course, also private corporations thinking revitalization of whatever that other is that rural or that in between or that borderland is also worthwhile to considering. So the government given Jakuman, which is roughly 10,000 euro for people to relocate for 3 years or whatever offers they have. There are huge incentives of people to consider that. And for example, Persona sending 3,000 employees to Awajima, which is south of Kobe, to say we can be more remote because telework is a real option. I mean, it's not taking off as say, let's say in Germany or maybe in Europe, but there is hope that this share will bring some change for the better. So revitalization and that hope of that others have a chance too. But now the question is, if I have a, let's say, or I'm in charge of a small community which needs revitalization. For example, we can't handle our finances. We don't have enough taxes. We have a huge aging population. And so how do I measure then elements to revitalize or to be revitalized? Then I think it is a lot about asking, what do people really need? Are the reasons going well? I mean, what are the reasons of that place? Is it worthwhile to revitalize each small village? This is really, really an important thing. We had the huge white elephant development over the years that we have said we need a museum and a museum and a museum and a museum. So yes, but I think somebody, Alex Kerr, had mentioned that often in his book, the Nichi no Seikatsu, the very ordinary. Yeah, that is nani mo nai ga aru. We have nothing special. You still can come and live here, and that's the point, permanently. So I think measuring, observing rhythms, but also if you want to evaluate the non-measurable, then you might have to look at the happiness of people, the well-being, without maybe much technology and much money, but the social well-being and, taking matters in their own hands. And this is something you can just see when you observe it. And on a regular basis, of course, long-term effects, not short-term pitches. COVID-19 brings some locals, but they move back and they are still connected and they still need freedom and support, even as youngsters. So there are many questions, and that can be something which we come back to, maybe the question before. We can compare that maybe to also, let's say, effects in Europe with the lockdown and, the changes in private spaces and the telework being something, the new normal. So giving chances to unknown and hidden places, and are they then revitalized or they just get a chance? Yeah.
Thank you.
Get this microphone. Yeah, okay, so we have, I think, let's say we can take a bit quarter of an hour because we had a delay. So if you don't mind, another layman question, and then we can go to one more expert kind of question. But as I said, there are certain things that are, familiar to me, and then, I really like to know a little bit more about them. One thing that is very, very popular nowadays, and you also mentioned it in your book, is the concept of smart cities. And, now in Ljubljana, it's also talk about this, and pretty sure I will have a lot to say when it comes to domestic media, this promoted by China in particular, I would argue. In our neighborhood in Serbia, we have one city, Niš, that is turning into a smart city. We have examples of projects, as I'm sure you know, in Spain, in the Netherlands, in Germany. So I'm just wondering, to get a little bit of a more, let's say, insight or, an informed view, can you share with us your skepticism and or optimism about this concept, and how do you think Tokyo responds to this challenge? If you can just share a few thoughts.
Heide, I will give you the floor this time.
Okay.
And then
this is an interesting question because we are just working on new research, which is kind of, but I think one important aspect which we can come here is it top down versus bottom up. And you have private corporations like Toshiba, Hitachi, whatsoever, who initiate projects also with University of Tokyo and have so-called smart cities or SDG cities, or I mean, there's a whole term of transition cities. There are global movements who try to look at slow cities and so on. But this often comes from way top down, looking for examples where, for example, Panasonic has something in Kanagawa, supporting a whole village with low energy or even zero energy, and then you know, fashionable bookstore comes next to it, or bottom up, which is like looking at self-governance, for example, in the problem of derelict school buildings, which then turn into community centers, and not so much into tourism, but into getting people together and having meeting points, low cost, of course, for elderly, for people who take courses, who have to interact with each other, for emergencies, for resilience, which really don't wait for the government to come and tell them what options they have, but saying basically, okay, let's get local families and do some organic farming. And yes, maybe have a, I don't know, DIY run school activities after club. And yes, eventually maybe a cook from Tokyo moves into the countryside and uses farm to table as a very fashionable project there. So really, really interesting aspects there. So I would say smart cities from top down, I find them very empty and generic, versus to something quite unique, and they don't advertise this at a big scale. And once you advertise it, it might be already too late. So there are very hidden aspects of even the garbage disposal culture. So this kind of, I would say, placemaking, participation placemaking or self-governance, and really, really unique. Is it cultural specific would be my question. Is it something we can learn or can teach to others? But there is a huge potential we should also support and, of course, consider.
Matjaz?
Yes, well, this is also one of my, let's say, new things that I'm now working on. So I'm really happy that you asked this question. Why? Because I see, for example, in terms of Tokyo, in relation to Tokyo, that, for example, we were talking about creativity, and we are talking about the so-called creative paradigm. Why a paradigm? Because it's applied so many times in so many occasions that it's already got this inflation. It become an inflated word. And the same is with smart cities. So first, the creativity discourse was, or creativity approach was used as an instant fix for specific type of policies. And now we shifted very quickly from creativity approach to smart city approach, which is again seen as a savior of a situation, a savior which will save the process. But the thing is, we haven't even finished with creativity, because creativity is so much connected to the smart city concept. Both concepts, in fact, intersect. They are dependable upon each other. So they were naturally integrated, interwoven between themselves. And this is so, from my aspect, it's not done well. And why it's not done well? Because if I look now back to the smart city, in fact, nobody knows what a smart city is. It's a dynamic concept like creativity. When somebody says that he knows the definition of smart city, please run and hide yourself, take a shelter, because it's impossible to have. And it's interesting that you mentioned that some cities are turning into smart cities. There are no smart cities in the world. They're just smart neighborhoods, smart parts of the city, because in these generic terms, smart cities are technology, and the more smart technologies that you try to integrate in the city, it makes the city operating more smart technology. But there is no smart city. So, for example, in Serbia that you mentioned, these cities are not smart cities. Or even Ljubljana talks about being a smart city. It's not a smart city. It's about, or when Seoul or Tokyo talks about being a smart city, it's not that they are smart cities. They are integrated specific technologies, which are so-called smart technologies. And this is the problem with the smart city concept, because when we say smart city, I say this word is very problematic, they mainly mean the technical side of the smartness. So how to integrate specific technical infrastructures which do with digitalization, Internet of Things, and so on. So on the discursive level, they use smart city as a set term, which is that everybody understands, but in fact it's not, because the definition of smart cities also includes communities, and these communities, or let's say the feedback from the stakeholders, is not well integrated into the smart city concept at the moment, because too much attention is on the technical side of smart cities. So on sensors, how to catch the data, and how to accumulate data, data mining, data analyze. But there is a huge problem with this, because we have the capacity to accumulate this huge amount of data, but we have really bad capabilities of how to analyze them, of how to interpret them. And this is so easily to see on each step of smart city technology development. Just look at the problems which we have with the accumulation of data, with the privacy of the data, but not just with the privacy of the data, because let's say the privacy issues which are being breached each time some new smart technology is being introduced. And then on the other side, we have problems with this, which is already accumulated, because we interpret them very simply. So there is oversimplification of data because they want to use it so quickly in order to spur specific urban development. And this is very problem with, there is no, the reflexive capabilities are really low at the moment, and they don't integrate a lot of social sciences in it. And this is very problematic when we talk about smart city concept. And similarly, of course, all global cities want to adapt now to the new buzzword, which is smart city. So there is a shift in buzzwords from creativity to smartness, but we haven't even finished, as I said, with the one. And sometimes the new buzzword is just a camouflage for the old word, because creativity integrates innovation and all these aspects of smart cities. So it's just a little bit transformed and refurbished and camouflaged and put on the market of the, let's say, new trendy, hip trends that should be integrated in the cities. And it goes so well with these fast policies, the numerous authors like Peck well, there are so many authors which talk, or Theodore, for example, which talk about these fast policy transitions which are happening too quickly and too short term, and not being placed on in the terms of sustainability or of long-term thinking. And I think that Alyosha wanted to say something. Because
I wanted to ask you, because as I lived for many years in one of those smart cities, which is definition smart city, Songdo, at the outskirts of Incheon in South Korea, that was already pasted 2 times in China in the same shape by Cisco Corporation and other players. I absolutely agree with what Heide said about hidden dimensions and communal dimensions that are bubbling under cover and under the surface in such situations. I try to study that for my own sake, and it is fascinating. And so this is one way to go. And then what Matjaz said about dimensions, that yes, creativity is appropriated, but also sustainability and environmental discourse as a third huge dimensions. For instance, in Songdo, we didn't have that much about creativity, but we were obsessed about recreating nature, while we were living on the artificial island that removed kilometers or miles of sea and changed natural bird habitats and fish habitats into unlivable mud. And discourse of environmental protection was all pervading. So it was the most bizarre experience of my entire life to live in that smart city. I didn't become any smarter from it, but I'm looking forward to the continuation of your research. I will read it carefully.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alyosha. And well, it's interesting because I also was in Songdo, but and I took a little bit of research in Songdo, and it's crazy because they have so many problems, and it's a typical smart city which is not well elaborated in social terms. I took some pictures which I still show to the students where there are not a lot of people are living in it. So they have huge problems with.
It's desert. It's desert inhabited by these people shifting from oasis to oasis, trying to survive. And there is, sorry, Heide, just this, there is also moral dimension to it, which is crazy, with conservative discourse appropriating the discourse of smartness, creativity, and sustainability to push away subcultures, youth cultures, but even sexuality. So you have churches Christian churches put at the center of Songdo, with love motels and love hotels pushed across the canal in the realm of dirt. And then you have Korean government forbidding poor people from living there. Officially, Songdo district not taking part in government support for socially exposed whatever citizen, because they don't want socially vulnerable citizens there. So it is like cleansing. It's not necessarily ethnic cleansing, but it is cleansing on so many levels which are not environmentally friendly, even though it's cleansing. Yeah, that's it.
I mean, just to come to an end, because I also here it's already nighttime. You know, have to go to another meeting. I'm very sorry for that, but I think we could continue that discussion for many more occasions and also research further. And I'm very happy that you know, sharing that experience living in other places. We could also ask questions: what do really people are looking for? Or let's say Amos Rappaport said, walking along a straight street, soon you become very bored, and you might either trash it or you leave your dirt behind. But turning around that next corner and discovering something really new and, you know, unknown, and which is not produced 100 times by global things like Starbucks or whatsoever, is something which keeps us alive. It has to be, I don't want to say original, but we need that interaction with the difference and the, you know, with the other on a human scale. Otherwise, I think our life will be very much lowbroad. So we want this smart technologies, whatever that will be. In Korea, I see drone taxis now introduced, and think, yeah, great, but we still need that level of interaction, and I think is what we missed the most in COVID times. So I don't know if Zlatko has another final question, but I would like to thank everybody for the questions, and we could take this further on another occasion, of course, too.
No, I first of all, I have to apologize. Obviously, something wrong with my internet connection here. But no, as you said, Heide, actually what I thought would be a good hour. We had a little bit of delay, so I was thinking 15 minutes more, and this is pretty much now where we are at. So just if you can give me 1 minute to thank you, Heide, and to thank you, Matjaz, for sparing the time with us. I also think that, also from my perspective, very interesting book for sure, even for a layman, very interesting questions. I really like the most of the answers I heard about smart cities. I will discuss about this bilaterally with Matjaz as well. Yeah, thank you very much, and good luck with the promotion of the book. And yeah, hopefully we'll see each other again with some more book successes, and have a good night in Japan. And we have a very good portion of the day to go here in Ljubljana. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
And keep sending messages. You know how to reach us. I'm very happy this was possible, and even though in a small group, I think it is recorded, so we might even get some feedback on your website and on here on the website. Thanks for listening. I'm very happy that this was possible.
Yeah, and I hope to see you all maybe in vivo, not just in vitro.
Yes, in real, in a better post-pandemic situation. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.